Economics is the study of production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services using math to make it really difficult. Beginning with Thomas Malthus, it got even more dismal. It could take years of college study to get from dismal and complicated to interesting stuff. So I have my own take. Macroeconomics focuses on entire economies, including concepts like gross domestic product, inflation, and the business cycle. Can these be forecast accurately, and can policies be instituted to improve economic conditions? The claim is yes. Unfortunately, people do not have a great track record forecasting much of anything. Microeconomics focuses on specific decisions by individuals and firms to allocate resources, like what to buy and sell at what price and quantity. Economists can model simplified versions of these decisions using calculus to optimize something, usually profit, revenue, or utility. The simplified theory of how markets work at the micro level is perfect competition, where equilibrium is reached for supply, demand, quantity, and price, the result providing a normal profit for the producer. Impossible, you say? True, but the model provides insight on how markets could work in ideal situations. More recent models include imperfect competition, monopoly models, and possible roles for regulation. As an accountant, I favor full disclosure rules and audits. Economics was something of an Enlightenment side hustle, with Scottish philosopher Adam Smith given credit as the father of economics for his revolutionary 1776 The Wealth of Nations. Smith stressed the importance of self-interest motivating economic activity, with markets clearing because of the invisible hand. He recognized the importance of the division of labor for increased productivity and opposed government interference in favor of free markets. Smith's enlightened self-interest was reinforced by his earlier work, The Theory of Moral Sentiment, which emphasized ethical treatment in economic activity and considering the well-being of others. Unfortunately, powerful entrepreneurs, like other elites, were more likely to jump from wealth of nations to Machiavellian ruthlessness. British politician and economist David Ricardo developed one of the most important economic concepts, comparative advantage. People and countries should concentrate on industries where they have the greatest efficiency. British wool was prized, and Britain during the Middle Ages was capable of completing the entire wool processing and clothing manufacturing. However, most of the raw wool was transported to the continent for processing. Why? Comparative advantage. It was more profitable for British farmers and merchants to concentrate exclusively on the wool. Capitalism is an economic system where the means of production are owned and controlled by the private sector, and individuals and businesses control supply and demand, which determine market price. A free market is assumed, meaning the government is not involved in market decisions. The purpose of production is to make a profit, meaning supplying goods that people want at a fair price. British philosopher Jeremy Bentham invented utility theory, stating that actions are correct that provide the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. Economists measure this as utils of satisfaction, claiming it can be measured for individuals or groups. Thus, consumer satisfaction can be measured and maximized. Capitalism and free markets sound great, but there are characteristics that tend to get swept under the theoretical rug. A key one is externalities, which are costs or consequences that are not factored into the cost of production. The big one is pollution. It's easy to dump that toxic sludge into the formerly pristine river and cost next to nothing. The cost to those downstream and both the economy and ecology as a whole could be gigantic, but tough. It's not a cost of doing business in a free market. Remember, those government regulations are evil and probably socialist. Socialism is where the means of production are owned and controlled by the state. In its strict sense, that means bureaucrats determine what is produced, at what price and quantity. There are no free market mechanisms like Adam Smith's invisible hand. In practice, strict socialism has worked about as badly as would be expected. Somewhat puzzling is how many historians consider themselves socialist, like many members of the French Annales school. The term socialism can be used casually. Britain, for example, has the National Health Service for medical care, and this can reasonably be called socialized medicine. Obamacare was claimed to be socialized medicine, but was not. Like Medicare, it is a payment mechanism, while medical practices stay private. Scandinavian countries tend to have more government ownership and involvement, but they are in fact mixed economies. A mixed economy means that production is split among private firms, nonprofits, and the government. The U.S. and most economies are mixed. The majority of the U.S. economy is in the private sector. There are millions of nonprofit organizations that provide goods and services that are not a good fit for profit-making firms. And government provides public goods. Public goods are needed and users cannot be barred from using them, like public roads and enforcing regulations. The classic public good is the military. A problem with free markets is monopoly power and other economic abuses. We tend to think of monopolies like J.P. Morgan's railroads or Rockefeller's Standard Oil. However, the Middle Ages and beyond are filled with power abuses in multiple forms. Cannons on merchant vessels can transfer military to economic power. Following Italian city-states, Western European countries expanded ship and cannon building to maximize terror and destruction. How they used it will be a recurring theme for the Columbian Exchange. Stolper Samuelson is one of the most interesting and useful economic theories for understanding aspects of food history and trade. Consider the means of production, which are land, labor, and capital. Land can be extended to include plant and equipment. The scarce factor will become relatively expensive, the abundant ones cheap. Free trade would help farmers when land was abundant. Protectionist legislation changes the equation. The Corn Laws in Britain protected the aristocratic landowners, making food more expensive and harming the farm workers. Pushing free trade by repealing the Corn Laws favored workers over the landowners. Britain then imported most grains and other foods. In the early U.S., land was abundant, while labor and capital were scarce. Free trade helped farmers, particularly the plantation owners of the South. Tariffs, on the other hand, favored laborers and capitalists. After the Civil War, Northern Republicans favored protection and tariffs, while Southern Democrats favored free trade. Agricultural economics focuses on optimizing food production and distribution, including land usage. Major topics included maximizing crop yield and soil ecology. The University of Wisconsin established the Department of Ag Econ in 1909, based in part on applied agricultural information from the 19th century. Specific theories related to agriculture included the cobweb theory to explain cycles of demand and supply, and hedonic regression pricing models, a type of regression I used. We want to explain something, say the selling price of a farm product, that's the dependent variable, then consider various factors that would influence the prices as independent variables like weather patterns or use of fertilizers. Gutenberg created the printing press, books and literacy expanded, then the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment. Next time on Food History and Mystery.